ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has concluded his two-day testimony as head of the party before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, saying that there must be more protection for whistleblowers in the country. But for more on this, we're joined by Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, the Professor of Political Science at the University of Johannesburg. A very good evening to you, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Hi, good evening.
Well, what's your overall impression of the President's appearance at the State Capture Commission? Any earth-shattering revelations? And if not, why not? Because President Ramaphosa himself did concede that the ANC is accused #1 when it comes to corruption.
Well, no earth-shattering revelations, I'm afraid. I think the idea was to admit that which is already public, and where you are forced to say more, say as little and as vague as possible, because he didn't want to implicate other ANC members. He is still the president of the party. He has to protect the image and other members of the party. He doesn't want to be seen to be distancing himself from the party. And so that was his plan, and he seems to have stuck to it.
And speaking of distancing himself from other party members, I mean, it ties in well with party loyalty and membership of the ANC. I mean, remember that he spent half the day yesterday speaking about, cadre deployment or the deployment policy within the party. But they said that the party would now only appoint people who are fit for purpose, whatever that means. Only he knows what he means by that. And people will not be pushing party political factions within the party. But then, do you think that President Cyril Ramaphosa was just saving face? Do you think that he actually means that? And I mean, do you think that the ANC can actually afford, appointing unknown people, even though they are qualified, but people will not be in a position to push party political agendas?
Well, it does mean it. I mean, for instance, of the 9,000 senior managers you have, apparently 3,000 of them don't have qualifications. There's a cost to appointing people who are not qualified into jobs. There was a moment when this was required years ago because the ANC could not, change all the bureaucrats that they got. White staff members were kind of protected by the sunset clause. So it had a potentially hostile bureaucracy, so they couldn't trust all those people they got from the past, and so they had to appoint people that they trusted, people that they knew, because not everybody at the time was fully behind a transformation. So there was a need for people who were politically aligned to the ANC. And by the way, this is something that is done by parties all over the world. Parties have cadres that they appoint because parties win election on the strength of their own manifestos. So they need people who are knowledgeable, who will implement their own party manifesto. But at the same time, you need people who are not only politically aligned, but who are also competent. What has happened with the ANC is that policy was abused. Deliberately abused. It was not badly managed, as the president said. It was abused because the ANC became disfigured under President Zuma. I think there's widespread consensus that the kind of stuff that you had under Thabo Mbeki, for instance, competence and merit was highly prized. However, when Mbeki was kicked out, competence was watered down, and all that they were looking for was compliance with impropriety. So a lot of people who were not qualified, but were sycophants of certain leaders, were appointed. And the people that were competent, those who disagreed, were fired, like Themba Maseko, for instance. So the policy itself was abused. However, at this point in time, I think there's a general consensus that everybody wants transformation. ANC values, competence, delivery, and all those normal values that you have in any democracy are widely shared. So you need not confine your appointment to ANC cadres. You can widen it up a little bit. But however, you can never avoid a situation where senior leaders, DGs, possibly political advisors and all that, and even in the ministerial offices, you can't avoid appointment of politically aligned people there. That's just reality. That's how it works.
Now, on to the elephant in the room, which is corruption. I mean, the very same reason why the Commission of Inquiry was formed in the first place. He says that the ANC is accused number one when it comes to corruption on the one hand, but on the other hand, he says that Parliament dropped the ball when it came to, its oversight responsibilities. It seems to be shifting goalposts here. And who should be blamed for this?
Well, Parliament dropped the ball. The ANC dropped the ball. The ANC heard of the Guptas, for instance, as far back as 2011. They didn't act. They didn't act because they lacked courage to act. Acting would have meant confronting the one person who was responsible for that. That was Jacob Zuma. And to confront Jacob Zuma meant risking losing your job. So people became cowardly, fearing that they would lose their jobs. So instead of standing up for principles, standing up for efficiency of institutions, they decided to protect their own jobs. And so that was a cowardly act. It was not accidental. There was no failure, because failure assumes that there's some technical accidents or whatever that might have inhibited them from doing that. So both the ANC, NEC, and Parliament were stifled by the Jacob Zuma presidency, together with the appointees that he made in cabinet as well as caucus, to steer these institutions in a way that protected him and advanced his own personal interests. So it was a personalized presidency. You have to understand the structure. These things were not accidental, and they were not isolated. They were bred by the system itself, because that system, that presidency, was disfigured in a way that enabled abuse of power. And so even parliamentarians, you speak up against Jacob Zuma, you might not make it sometime later on as an MP. So people opted to protect their own salaries instead of protecting the republic and standing up for principles.
Are you at all impressed with how the issue of the CR17 documents was, the bank statements, as it were, was tackled? Because he now says that the campaign did not cost R1 billion, but only 300 million rand. Well, as if reducing the figure would make the issue go away.
Well, I'm not sure what is the fuss about the issue going away. There are issues of disclosure, obviously, about donations that are made to a campaign, which is something that we are waking up to now and are correctly demanding accountability and transparency, because we fear what favors might be done back to those donors, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's a little bit of context that must be understood here, in that was all ANC practice. That goes back. Candidates solicited money, they got money, there was no obligation to disclose who gave them money. And any serious candidate who wanted to win an ANC contest had to do that. Otherwise, he would have clearly lost, because money determined who won, right? And so Cyril Ramaphosa did not break the law, but he has made us worried. He got this money from private donors, so we don't know exactly what those guys expect back. So it would be useful of us to know. But whilst we are still on that point, it would even be more useful to get everybody disclose where they got their monies from. Because if you insist simply on one person disclosing, then that is selective, that is unfair. Because it means you are pretending that you are giving us information, informing us about something, whilst at the same time using that disclosure to hide other information. Mm-hmm. So if you insist on disclosure, which we must know, then it must be full disclosure, so that we are alert to the kind of donors that donated to ANC candidates, and be alert also to future actions, whether a particular company that donated to another candidate, if they get something, then will be a little bit more informed to ask questions whether or not they got it on merit or it was a quid pro quo.
Okay. He also said that state capture took place under their watch, including him. And he also lamented, remember that he also lamented that of the so-called 9 wasted years. And he was part of that 9 wasted years. So who should be held accountable? Should he also be held accountable as a collective?
They should be. They were all complicit in this. He was deputy president. But I also understand why he was quiet. He came in 2012 to give credibility to the ANC, to the Zuma presidency. Most people were shocked that he would associate himself with Jacob Zuma, given what was becoming apparent leading towards 2012. But he wanted to be president. And so to do that, you had to be part of the ANC. And you have to turn a blind eye. You have to be silent, pretend that you don't see certain things, because should you upset your boss, he might make it difficult for you to remain as deputy president or even to rise within the ANC. And at some point, he might have thought that perhaps Jacob Zuma wanted him to be president, because that's how Zuma came in. He was deputy, and became president. So Cyril might have thought that he would also be supported by Zuma to become president. But Jacob Zuma had other ideas, right? So, but for Cyril to stand a good chance of becoming president, he had to stay the course, keep quiet, up until such time that an opportunity opened up. So I don't blame him for that tactical move. It was a tactical move that he had to play given the environment. That's politics. You have to be realistic. You can't be naive, because that's how these things work. What is important, right, is what do you do with that power as soon as you become president? Mm-hmm. Do you honor the promises? Do you use that power for the benefit of the public to renew the ANC? So for me, really, the key thing is not to lament what he might have done. Yes, it's all noteworthy. But yes, it's something that he had to do tactically to win the presidency of the ANC. Had he not done that, we would have ended up with an even worse presidency than Jacob Zuma, or rather a continuation of that presidency. Yes. So what we need to ask ourselves is what Cyril did as part of the Zuma presidency, does that define his full measure, or was it tactical? And for us to answer that question, we have to look at what he has done now. He promised us renewal to change things. Has he done that? There's an indication that he is doing that. Not only that, but he's also succeeding. Okay. So the tactical moves that he made to win the presidency are beginning to pay off, because the country is returning to normalcy. All right. Professor, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your analysis with us. We appreciate it.